Hello, everybody. I think it is the video is getting up right now. So we are so excited to have you here for our live consulting sessions. We have the entire team here today. Yay. Okay, so my test for the RIOS going live worked today. Mike, it worked today.
Nice.
Yay. With that said, we're just going to dive right in. We're going to have Asal read, Mike go into it, and I'm just going to go all nuts. So let's go.
Okay, so we are going to start off with section 1 of the RIOS standard. And today we're only going to do section 1.1 scope and application and 1.2 QESH or quality environmental health and safety infrastructure, which we shorten we call it QESH for short. So I will read section 1.1 right now, and then Mike and Maya will talk about it. 1.1 scope and application. Recyclers shall consider activities performed by the recycler and outside providers and determine and document the scope of the RIOS management system. A, the scope statement shall be documented, and B, recyclers shall develop, implement, and continually improve a management system that includes the core elements of RIOS and relationships to documentation necessary to conform to the requirements of RIOS.
So this is pretty straightforward and simple. I think one of the things we're starting on RIOS now, so the RIOS 2016 standard kind of follows the same structure as the ISO 9001, 2015, all the 14001, 2015. Basically the Annex SL, the risk-based approach. So you're going to see a lot of the same concepts and ideas in the RIOS standard that are present in those things. This was revised a year after those standards came out. So you'll see a lot of that stuff here. Basically, one of the first things that you need to do when you're starting a management system is determine what your scope is. And the scope of that management system is going to govern what areas you need to make sure that you implement a management system in. So a scope statement is depending on how many facilities, the activities that you're doing. If you're only like a collector, maybe outside providers that are doing the recycling portion of it might be included, or outside providers that are coming to do maintenance of equipment that are not actual employees. So that's something to consider for the scope as well.
Can you tell me if for subsection B, it says that includes the core elements of RIOS? Is core elements defined, or what are the core elements?
The core elements are all the standard numbers like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you know, all of those are the core requirements.
Okay, and then so they all have to be implemented. Is there not any allowable like exclusions?
No.
Okay.
And I think that's I think there's no exclusions because it's health and safety. It includes health and safety. When you are doing health and safety, you just can't make any exclusion. But I'm going to mute myself now because there are sirens coming.
Okay, so no exclusion. That's a little bit different from like the ISO standard, well, the 9001 standard, which like you can technically exclude. Like a lot of companies don't do design and development activities, so you can exclude that. But here, RIOS, even though it does contain requirements for quality management system, there is no allowable exclusions, although I don't think the RIOS management system goes into as much depth with regards to the quality requirements as like an ISO 9001 standard. Am I right or wrong? I don't know.
I mean, it's focused on quality, but I would say it's probably a little bit more EH&S heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to say about section B, actually, in 1.1, now that the sirens have gone away, is that 1.1B is packed with requirements. And that's actually something that we see throughout RIOS, is that RIOS does an amazing job at summarizing the requirements from ISO 9001 2015 quality management system, ISO 14001 2015 environmental management system, and now ISO 45001 2018. So but that's done, and that's able to be done by packing these little subsections with requirements. So if you take a look at the recycler share develop, so you have to document, implement, you have to make sure that you implement every single standard and you continually improve it, which includes the core requirements of RIOS and other documentation in order to support, meaning what is your inventory management system? Meaning what is your test, how do you test your metals? And so all of these things are kind of, I would want to call 1.1B as a thesis of RIOS, of what you're going to come out at the end of it. And when we go through the standard later on, we'll see that there's specific clauses that are just packed with requirements. We read it, and it reads very easy, but it can also be deceptive.
So yeah, that 1.1B is also talking about things like the interaction of processes that you're going to see in 4.4 of the ISO standard. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot in that couple lines there.
Like when you say the core elements of RIOS and the relationships, that means that means you document an interaction of processes, basically.
Core elements of RIOS and the relationship to documentation necessary to conform to the requirements of RIOS.
Very packed. Okay. 1.1.1 RIOS Outcomes. The recycler shall implement a RIOS management system that A, prevents adverse quality, environmental, and health and safety outcomes. B, promotes improved product or service quality, positive environmental results, and worker health and safety. C, systematically manages its risks, opportunities, and stakeholder and legal requirements in an organized and controlled manner. D, manages change to proactively address impacts to quality, environment, and health and safety. E, monitors and measures QESH performance. And F, identifies and corrects causes of nonconformance to improve the recycler's QESH performance.
So again, this is a really packed thing. So this actually goes through the plan, do, check, act model here, because you're going to see, like in the first, in A and B, it's talking about risk assessment, or kind of like SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat, that high level context of the organization, the internal and external issues, interested parties, and things related to quality, environmental, health, and safety, to avert those types of risk related to those things and to capture the opportunities there. And then it gets more granular and kind of managing the risk and opportunities, stakeholder, legal requirements in an organized and controlled manner. So that's kind of like, make sure that you implement a system. And D is kind of the change, management of change. If you do, once you implement a system, every time you have a change in processes, activities, new equipment, or something like that, you need a little mini PDCA, a plan, do, check, act, to ensure that that process that you're introducing into your management system is properly implemented and becomes a part of the management system like everything else, including looking at what are the potential risks, what are the potential opportunities, what are the resources necessary, what's the training, do we need to change our internal audit plan? So all kinds of stuff like that. And then checking. So E is monitoring and measuring QESH performance. So that could be looking at your risk and opportunities, looking at your footprint, looking at your objectives, looking at all the various things that you monitor and measure, like maintenance PMs, your legal requirements, so many things. So again, this is really, although this seems like a real high level thing, it is high level, but it's also packed with stuff. And identify and correct causes of nonconformities to improve the recycler's QESH performance. So that's acting. Once you monitor and measure the system that has been implemented and find things that are wrong, you're going to continually improve the system by implementing the corrective action process and start another plan, do, check, act cycle.
And one of the things that we do in order to do the mini PDA, right, is something that all of the ISO standards are requiring, which is change management, right? Mm-hmm. And change management can be called many different things, right? You can call it change management. You know, you can have a change management form that goes through all of the requirements. And also, you know, there is specific things that you can put in place for equipment only. And obviously the equipment, if you are in a RIOS situation and you are deploying a new piece of equipment, which is rather large and imposes very high risk for health and safety, then your actual change management form or maybe PESHA form, right, is going to be, you know, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 pages long, because you have to go through the whole entire risk assessment for that process, versus when you are just introducing something smaller or doing a document change. That change process or PDCA is going to be much smaller.
And that's what, and we'll get to that in section 3.3 of the standard. Change management, definitely, it does mention twice, you know, like QESH impacts, RIOS footprint, and important risk. So yes, those things are very crucial, especially in the recycling world. You're introducing machinery, earth-moving machinery sometimes that can be fatal or cause serious injury if misused.
Or you have shredders, or you have, you know, laboratories, and so you have to take into consideration air emissions. So
sure, yeah.
1.2 QESH Infrastructure, 1.2.1 Management Structure. Senior management shall establish, document, and communicate a hierarchy of roles and responsibilities for the effective operation of the RIOS management system. A, senior management shall identify the senior manager responsible for health and safety for all recycler activities. Senior management shall identify the QESH management representative responsible for the RIOS management system.
Okay, so there's, so yeah, we're in, I hate to make comparisons to ISO, but we're in chapter 5 of the ISO standards, the leadership portion now. Before, up there was more like chapter 4, a little bit sprinkles of chapter 6. So in the planning portion, right? This is the high level stuff. Still, the RIO standard, like any ISO standard, is requiring and saying that top management or leadership is responsible ultimately for the implementation of the management system, shall establish, document, and communicate a hierarchy of roles and responsibilities for the effective operation of the management system. So they need to determine what they need to do, who needs to be in place. And unlike the ISO standards, it specifically does still call out the need for an identified QESH management representative. And not only that, somebody who is the senior manager responsible for health and safety of all recycler activities. So that's very important, you know, that it calls out those things. These people need to be identified. And it says not only it doesn't say something about like the implement and continually act upon. It says establish, document, and communicate a hierarchy of roles. So this is something, if it's communicated, it needs to be understood. So if this is auditable, you could go up to somebody and say, tell me who's in charge of health and safety, and they should be able to point to the right person.
Mm-hmm. And what about this statement? So the health and safety, the person responsible for health and safety, does this mean they have to come from, they have to be one of the managers, right? Like it can't be like a supervisor or just any worker. Like I think what they're trying to do is like they're saying the person responsible for health and safety has authority within the
Authority, yeah.
organization.
Senior manager, I mean, that could represent, depending on the organizational structure, but that's somebody who has definitely authority to make decisions, not a lame duck position. Like sometimes you see the management representative is just a lame duck position where they have no actual authority to do anything. And I guess that could be true for this one here. It doesn't really say senior manager, but for health and safety, which is much more important, it has to be a senior manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make a distinction here, right, between having a senior manager for health and safety, responsible for overall health and safety, right? So like the buck stops with him or her, versus a health and safety administrator or the administrator of a program, right? So we can have somebody who is implementing the programs, but at the end of the day, they are really answering to the senior management responsible for health and safety, who is responsible for health and safety, whatever it is that happens in that facility.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to 1.2.2 resources. Senior management. Oh, is that where we're stopping? Oh no, we're stopping at 1.3. My bad. Okay, so 1.2.2 resources. Senior management shall determine and ensure the necessary resources for the effective implementation, operation, and continual improvement of the RIOS management system. Resource needs shall consider existing internal resources, including competent workers, need for external resources of outside providers, financial resources, and infrastructure. Note, infrastructure may include equipment, technology, transportation, working space, buildings, etc.
So a lot of stuff here. There's one of the main things. So resources includes both the workers that you have as part of the organization, as well as external resources. Like if you have outsourced preventive maintenance or consultants, or providing money to actually do something, to buy equipment that's necessary to or PPE or other things, putting up the money that's necessary to effectively implement a RIOS management system, meaning that you have an effective quality environmental health and safety program in place, and that management is supporting it by providing enough people, enough money, and the infrastructure, which is, could be the buildings, the location, everything that goes into infrastructure, enough trucks to do the pickups that are necessary, preventive maintenance on the equipment to make sure that it's running properly, IT people, or a server if you have multiple locations and need to have backup. So there's a lot of stuff that is going on here. Again, this chapter 1 is really dense and packed with a lot of stuff. Resources is I would say one of the biggest issues with organizations is that senior management does not commit the necessary resources for effective implementation many times, and that's when you'll see systems that are crippled and not working as intended. There's always a problem. There's always an issue with it. It's not able to do its job properly because there's not enough resources, whether it's enough money or enough human resources in terms of workers, or management telling people, don't focus on that. Get those numbers out. So yeah, resources is a lot of times an issue. When you do root cause analysis, you come down resources.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest pitfalls that our clients face, is not enough time to maintain, and improve the management system. Because once you implement the management system, that's a big project. So like, it's understandable that you're going to expect somebody to devote a certain amount of hours per week to the implementation. But after implementation, it doesn't run itself, so
No.
the recycler really should consider how much time per week or per month they want to allocate for somebody to maintain the management system, because maintenance includes record keeping, auditing, following up with nonconformities, a weekly, monthly, whatever hazard walkthroughs, all of that stuff, compliance, keeping up with compliance requirements. So all those stuff, it takes, what would you say is the average amount of hours per week? What would be to maintain a management system?
All of that depends on what standards you're certified to, the size of your organization, the management system, that your own internal management system requirements. If you have a really simplified management system versus a very like beefed up, dense and long drawn out management system. So all of that depends. It's really hard to quantify. I don't want to throw anything out there because I can't make a proper prediction without taking these several factors into consideration.
I do want to comment on that though and say that RIOS is not one standard.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's 3 standards. So yes, it's true, smaller organizations who are implementing ISO 9001, 2015 without design component, very simple, very easy, not a lot of time, resources per week, relatively.
Yeah. It depends how many management systems you have, right?
So there are a lot of factors that influence that, and the only way, like Mike said, for us to really make an assessment how many hours would be necessary to effectively maintain a system would really, we would need to know more details about the organization.
Okay. Any final notes before we move on to the last section, senior management?
No.
1.2.3, senior management. Senior management of the organization shall demonstrate leadership and commitment by A, planning, ensuring policies are established and applied to the RIOS management system, ensuring the RIOS management system is consistent consistent and integrated with the business operations, ensuring QESH goals are established relevant to the recycler's operations, ensuring that hazard identification, evaluation, and control is applied to the entire scope of the RIOS management system, and allocating resources, supporting management, and directing personnel to ensure the effective implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the RIOS management system. Do you want me to stop there? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So again, this plan, do, check, act, right? So this is in the planning phase. You need to establish the policies, the quality, environmental, health and safety policies, and any other appropriate policies that are necessary within the operation. And how do you integrate all the requirements of the RIOS standard? So that's kind of like, we're going back up to 1.1 where it said the relationships, the core elements of RIOS and relationships to documentation necessary to conform to the requirements of RIOS. So how do you ensure that throughout the whole organization, throughout the scope of your QESH management system, your business activities are taken into consideration and have been integrated with the requirements of the RIOS standard? And that proper goals are established and hazard identification's been done properly. So all of these things are part of the planning phase, looking at your footprint, which includes, the important health and safety hazards and important environmental aspects. as well as your legal requirements and customer requirements. There's a lot of stuff in the footprint. Well, it's going to take some time to go through the footprint, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff in here. But ultimately, just like chapter 5 of the ISO standards, this is essentially saying that, you know, top management is ultimately their direction. They're directing the management system in terms of planning. You know, they don't necessarily need to be at every meeting, but they need to allocate resources, support management, and direct personnel to ensure the effective implementation. So that means that, you know, whatever that takes, allocating resources, enough money, enough personnel, giving that person enough time to do their job, and support them, give them the authority to do it. Like, that's the one thing Asal talks about. Like, if you're, what is leadership if you're not supporting the person to actually have the authority to do something, and they're a lame duck, and directing personnel for the effective implementation. So this is all in the planning phase, determining how to properly implement the management system.
Mike, awesome. The only thing that I want to highlight is in the second point.
Yeah.
Is integrated with business operations. A lot of organizations, regardless of what standard or standards they're implementing, they always think, oh yeah, that's not part of me. That's like part of this management system that we touch once a year. That is not an intent of any standard, including RIOS, and RIOS actually spells it out, saying that you need to integrate whatever this is with your business operations. So when somebody who is in business development in a metal trading company says we are different and this doesn't apply to us, we cannot accept that as an answer. So we're going to have to figure out how to integrate this within your organization. What are you responsible for? Because you are responsible for at least health and safety on the quality side to define the customer requirements, right? So I think that's something that should be kept in mind.
It's always those darn salespeople that are hard to wrangle and have a mind of their own.
I gotta say though, like in our experience, that a lot of the requirements from these standards are activities that the organization does anyway, because it just makes sense. It's common sense, and it's required by other like regulations or clients. So you're most of the time, like, you're doing these activities anyway, but implementing a standard just means you may need to document one extra thing or keep a record of one thing that normally you would like throw away or something. I don't know.
And for those darn salespeople, commit to the exact same process, regardless of who you are, who your customer is, what your territory is, and all of those things. And whether you're sales or purchasing or whatever, I think the real hard part when it comes to certain processes, and you know, I talk about engineers and ISO 9001, is one of the hardest things is to commit to the same process for every single order.
B, implementation. Anything else to add before I move on?
No.
Okie dokie. Ensuring outside providers and suppliers are incorporated into the plans and policies of the RIOS management system, and supporting and communicating the organization's commitment to the RIOS management system.
So yeah, I mean, outside providers and suppliers. So outside providers in the RIOS sense here more is like referring to people coming on site to do equipment maintenance or consultants or stuff like that. Whereas suppliers could be I forget, there's something in here that talks about customers. There's all kinds of different language that's used in these standards, like customers, suppliers, external providers, outside providers. So anyways, whoever is not a part of the organization has to also be considered in part. How do they impact your quality, environmental, health, and safety? So by them coming on site, how does that impact the health and safety of them as well as your workers? And do they have any effects on the quality of the ultimate product or service that they're giving, that you're providing to your customers? So that's something that needs to be considered in the implementation of the management system.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I can try this. Do you see this?
You need to probably, yeah, supply.
So if you
product.
think about it as a bow kind of a diagram, we have the supply, which actually, if you are a RIOS yard, your supplier is also your customer, right? And then there we go. We have, so this is the bow diagram. We have our suppliers who are also our customers because they are providing us metal, which goes into our process, which is the operations. And in the operations, this is where we're doing our sorting, where we're doing our processing, and we're doing staging, and also right, we have sales now. We have selling our product to our customers. So when it comes to who my supplier is, really my supplier is whoever I'm getting metal from. External provider is somebody who is providing me service or a vendor, right? And then I also have material supplier or whatever, like products, right? And that's primarily purchasing, right? But then on this side, we have customers. So when we're talking about who is my customer, when it comes to RIOS, I have customers on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's really tricky later on in the RIOS when we talk about approving my suppliers, right? You have to approve your customers. You have to inspect the material from your customers who are actually your suppliers. So
Yeah.
we can revisit this diagram later and maybe even put RIOS clauses within it so we can see where it all fits in. But I just wanted to kind of pull that up since Mike was mentioning all of the different.
Yeah, what's it called? Source material is the people you get your product from, whereas the consuming facility, so source material are the customers you get your metal from, or I mean, this is more than just metal, but just for the sake of this argument here. Whereas the consuming facilities are the customers that you sell your metal to for final disposition.
Yep.
Or somewhere else down the line, intermediate disposition.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so basically that section was with regards to kind of people outside of the organization and how they need to be aware of the organization's commitment or incorporated into the management system. So what are, can I ask you guys for some examples of how you would incorporate the outside providers into the management system? For
Sure.
example, if somebody comes on site, I'll have a policy posted for them to read. So I'm communicating the policy, and then maybe I have like internal like health and safety protocols for visitors. So that's kind of an example of integrating somebody from the outside into your management system, right?
Yes, exactly. And depending on what type of activity that you're doing, you might want to require them to take a course on some of the activities at your yard, to provide insurance, to to know your emergency preparedness and response procedures, to know some of your important footprints in regards to health and safety risk, as well as environmental impacts, so that they can be aware of how not to be injured or to injure others. So depending on what they're coming on site to do, like a contractor who's working in one of these giant shredders that can, going into a confined space and like getting involved with taking out blades from the shredder, and there's a lot of potential liability accidents that could occur in that area versus a visitor who's coming on site, who's a customer of a consuming facility to view your product to see whether or not they want to buy it, and just is going to tour along the yellow brick road that's out of the way of forklifts and other heavy machinery and stuff like that. So depending on who is coming on site should be commensurate with what you're doing to prepare them for the on-site visit.
Cool. Okay, so C, monitoring performance and continual improvement. Monitoring the effectiveness of the RIOS management system and ensuring the RIOS management system achieves the intended results, and promoting continual improvement of the RIOS management system.
So the word monitoring is loaded because that basically means everything that's a part of the management system. You can monitor stuff through internal audits, through evaluation of compliance, through monthly walkthroughs, through source control checks, through quality checks that are done by another department or your QC or whoever you have to do this. So there's so much stuff that is involved in monitoring. Essentially, this is just kind of summarizing the whole model of a management system that is in alignment with the process-based approach, right? The risk-based thinking and the plan, do, check, act model. You see that very clearly here. So this standard is based upon that process approach of the plan, do, check, act model and the risk assessment. And a big part of ensuring that you're mitigating risk and capturing opportunities is monitoring your performance, your quality, environmental, health, and safety performance to ensure that you achieve the intended results. So the things like for quality, the intended result of that is always that you would meet customer requirements and have a satisfied customer. For the environment, it's always that you would prevent pollution and adhere to regulatory requirements, and for health and safety that you would prevent incidents and accidents and protect worker health and safety and adhere to the regulatory requirements. So those are kind of general, broad kind of ISO terminology, but it's very similar in terms of what is important here in a quality environmental health and safety management system under the recycling industry operating standard.
Cool. Okay. So in summary, management should be committed and show their commitment. And there are so many different ways that we just read here where they can do that. So any closing thoughts?
I want to reiterate what Asal said, is that most companies are already doing all of this. And then I said, yes, absolutely, they're doing this. The difference between doing it and actually being able to get certified is the commitment to doing it one way. And that's why it's important to document it.
So thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions with regard to RIOS or any other management standard, you can contact us at info@glenviewgroup.com. Please go to our website, www.glenviewgroup.com, and to look at more information with regards to RIOS certification and training, but also to look at our training calendar. And if your organization needs to get certified to the R2 standard, we offer masterclass, and it includes the requirements from RIOS integrated into the R2 standard as well. So it's 4 standards for one price. So please go check that out and join us same time, same place next week. And we will talk about section 1.3, document and record keeping. Bye.